I stood in the garage longer than usual that morning, my breath fogging the air as I stared at the Porsche. My Porsche, midnight silver, sleek lines glinting under the dim light. I traced the curves with my eyes the way a sculptor studies her finished piece. To anyone else, it was just a luxury car. To me, it was proof. Not of wealth, though sure, it had a price tag that could pay off someone's mortgage, but of every hour I'd worked past midnight, every promotion I'd fought for without favors, and every man in every boardroom who underestimated me. This wasn't a gift, it was a trophy. I stepped closer, fingers grazing the door handle, and that's when I noticed it. A fingerprint on the passenger side window, slightly smeared. Faint, but there. Odd. I hadn't driven the car in 3 days, and I lived alone. No valet, no partner, no curious neighbor. Just me. I pulled my hand back, the chill of suspicion biting more than the January air. In this family, success is communal, but only if you didn't earn it yourself. If you clawed your way up, you were selfish. If they handed it to you, then suddenly it was noble sacrifice. Later that evening, I found myself in my parents' house in the suburbs. The smell of pot roast hit me before the door even closed behind me. Sunday dinner, a weekly performance of familial obligation. Elodia, my mother, moved through the dining room with practiced grace, pouring wine like we were still the portrait of a well-bred household. She smiled without warmth. My father, Tristan, sat at the head of the table as always, nodding approvingly at everything Narina said. Narina, my younger sister, the family's golden child by default, not merit, currently launching a podcast about authentic living, whatever that meant from someone who edited her face into another person's life online. So proud of Narina for staying focused, Tristan said, raising his glass. I'd just been named in Crane's 40 Under 40, but sure, let's toast the podcast that hadn't released a single episode yet. Elodia placed a generous portion of roast on Narina's plate and a modest one on mine. She never needed to say it out loud. Her portioning spoke volumes. You know, Narina said, swirling her wine like she actually knew what legs meant. I might need something newer soon. I have meetings in the city, can't show up in a rust bucket. I didn't look up. I kept cutting my carrots. Quiet, measured. That's unfortunate, I replied, voice steady. Narina pouted. Your car just sits in your garage. You barely use it. Elodia jumped in. You have too, Serafina. Why so protective? My fork paused mid-air. That tone, polite accusation wrapped in motherly concern. The unspoken line, why can't you just give? I use it, I said plainly, then returned to my plate. Dinner continued. Awkward, brittle. Tristan talked about a family friend's real estate deal. Narina laughed too loud at a joke I didn't catch. I barely tasted the food. Back home, I headed straight to the valet box by the door. My fingers hesitated before opening it. The spare key to the Porsche. Gone. I didn't panic. I didn't shout. I just stood there. My mind replayed the last few days, the last few comments. Narina had asked last week. How do those keyless systems work anyway? Like, could you start it from your phone? At the time, it felt like idle curiosity. Now, it clicked into place. She didn't ask. She assumed. I picked up my phone, thumbed in a message to my father. Did you borrow the Porsche? The reply came too fast. Don't be dramatic. Not a no, not a yes. Just the dismissal that always came when I dared to question the family script. That night, I sat on my couch, the glow from the TV flickering across the room, but I wasn't watching. I opened the Porsche app, scrolled through the internal logs. There it was. Entry recorded. 1:12 a.m. 3 days ago. Location pinged at a cafe downtown. I hadn't been anywhere near there. I hadn't driven since Tuesday. That was Friday night. The key wasn't just taken, the car was used. The next morning, Narina called. Her voice was sugary sweet, the kind that made your molars ache. Hey sis, I have this super important meeting Monday. Can I borrow the Porsche? Just for a few hours. I let the silence sit before answering. My stomach clenched. I knew what she'd done. I knew what she was doing. But that old programming kicked in. Don't be difficult. Don't cause waves. No, I said finally. It's not available. Her tone changed instantly. The sugar melted. Seriously? Why do you always have to make things hard? I could picture her face, eyebrows raised, head tilted, the practiced expression of martyrdom. Later that evening, Elodia called. I just talked to Narina. She's hurt. Can't you just help your sister once? She already helped herself, I replied, cold. Elodia sighed, disappointed. You've always been the selfish one, Serafina. Click. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, the patterns in the plaster more comforting than the conversation replaying in my head. They never ask how I got what I have. They just want to decide what I do with it. I got up, grabbed my laptop, and ordered a remote immobilizer system for the Porsche. Installation scheduled first thing in the morning, just in case. By midnight, snow had started to fall, soft, slow, quiet. The kind of snowfall that made everything look peaceful until you realized what was buried beneath. I stood by the window, looking out at the driveway. The Porsche gleamed under the porch light, silent. I touched the glass with my fingertips. I'm not the one who changed, I whispered. I just learned to lock the door. The morning started with that kind of winter air that numbs your fingertips before you've even closed the door behind you. I stood in my kitchen, coffee half finished, phone in hand, not because I was expecting a message, but because I couldn't shake the need to look. Something about the way Elodia had ended that call last night stuck with me. Her tone, the practiced blend of disappointment and moral superiority, had curled under my skin and stayed there overnight. I opened the Porsche app. Not for anything in particular, just instinct. Maybe to reassure myself that the car was still where I left it. The dashcam logs were tucked away in a submenu I rarely touched, but today I opened them. The footage loaded slowly, grainy in places. Timestamp, 3 nights ago, 2:07 a.m. There she was, Narina, stepping into the driver's seat with a smoothie in one hand and her phone in the other, like she was about to vlog her joyride. The camera's angle caught everything. She didn't notice the trash can until she grazed it backing out, metal on metal. She hopped out, stared at the scratch, took a photo, of course she did, then got back in and drove off without hesitation. No text, no call, not even a passing mention. The worst kind of betrayal isn't loud. It's casual. It's dressed up in familiarity and woven into the assumption that you won't say anything because you're family. I closed the app and walked to the living room, sitting on the edge of the couch, that grainy footage looping in my mind like a bad movie scene I hadn't agreed to star in. Later that afternoon, I scrolled through our old texts. One popped up from 2 days ago. Narina, hope you're not mad, LOL. Followed by a gif of a cat knocking something off a table. I hadn't thought much of it at the time. Now it read like a preemptive joke, a soft warning. I've done something you'll hate, but I'm pretending it's nothing. This wasn't the first time either. There was a pattern, one I'd dismissed too often, borrowing sweaters and never returning them, showing up uninvited to events I was hosting and acting like the guest of honor. Asking for advice only to later present my ideas as her own in front of our parents. I pulled out one of my old journals. A line I'd scribbled in frustration from a few years ago stared back at me. People like Narina don't cross lines. They draw new ones after stepping over. I'd written that after she invited herself to a business retreat I had planned, then flirted with one of my clients. That memory still tasted bitter. And yet, somehow, I kept giving her space in my life. Maybe because deep down, I kept hoping she'd change, or that I'd finally matter enough to be respected. The next morning, I decided to visit Elodia. Not out of obligation, but because I needed to see something with my own eyes. She was in the upstairs hallway when I arrived, folding laundry. The house was warm, scented with citrus cleaner and something cinnamon-based. It smelled like a home that was always polished for guests, never truly lived in. "Morning, sweetheart," she said, not looking up. I followed her into Narina's room, formerly the guest room, now clearly personalized. Posters, skincare items, ring light by the window. And on the dresser, folded with surgical precision, was the Hermes scarf I gave Elodia last Christmas. Pale blue with golden trim, the one she'd gasped over when she unwrapped it. My eyes landed on it like a magnet. I thought I gave that to you, I said, keeping my tone even. Elodia looked over, briefly, then busied herself with the next shirt. Oh, honey, she liked it. I thought it'd mean more if she had it. I nodded, once. Said nothing. On the way back home, I drove slower than usual. Each red light gave me space to think, to recalculate. I wasn't angry in the explosive sense. It was something cooler, quieter. A shift. The realization that affection in this family was transferable like heirlooms, that nothing was really yours, not gifts, not achievements, not even sentiment, if someone else wanted it more. Back at home, I pulled out the old photo albums I kept boxed in the closet. Some of them were still sealed in plastic from the last move. I flipped through them, page by page. At first, there were birthday parties, school plays, Little League games. My face was there, smiling. Then fewer and fewer appearances. By high school, I was often the one behind the camera. By college, barely visible. Family photos without the family member who paid for dinner, who sent flowers on birthdays, who kept the holidays running on schedule. They always said I was busy, that I had my own life. But when you're edited out long enough, you stop asking why and start wondering if you were ever meant to be part of the frame. I remembered a quote from Maya Angelou that had once stopped me cold when I read it. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. I'd spent years hoping they'd change. Maybe it was time to accept that they wouldn't. And maybe that was okay. That night, I didn't write an angry email or vent to a friend. I opened a blank document and began listing boundaries. Not revenge, not punishment. Just clarity. Lines they wouldn't be allowed to cross anymore. If I have to fight to prove I matter, I typed, then maybe I never did. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a group message. Tristan, family dinner this weekend. We want to celebrate someone's new opportunity. Attached was a photo. It was blurry, slightly tilted, clearly taken in a rush, but unmistakable. Narina standing next to my Porsche in the driveway, one hand on the hood, wide smile, wearing sunglasses and that scarf. Caption: So proud of this girl, how next big thing. No mention of whose car it was, no acknowledgement of the keys she didn't ask for, no context, just performance. I stared at the screen. They weren't just borrowing things anymore. They were replacing me, one symbol at a time. The envelope from my father's business partner was still on the kitchen counter when I decided to stop by my parents' house. I told myself it was to drop off a gift for a cousin's birthday, technically true. But if I were being honest, I needed to walk through the door and look around. Not at them, at the walls. When Elodia greeted me, she didn't ask why I was there. She never did. She offered coffee, I declined, and I made my way down the familiar hallway toward the gallery labeled in calligraphy script, Our Legacy. The frames hadn't changed much over the years. Same lighting, same arrangement, same meticulously polished glass. What had changed were the faces, or more accurately, mine was gone. My graduation photo had been moved, not removed, just displaced. From the center to a lower corner, slightly tilted. The newer frames showed Narina, cap and gown, ribbon-cutting ceremonies, volunteer work that always happened to be in front of a camera. In one, she posed with a rescue puppy. In another, standing next to Tristan outside a charity gala I wasn't invited to. I stood there a while, long enough for Elodia to walk past me with folded towels in her arms, glance, then continue without saying a word. That glance, brief and calculated, was the confirmation I didn't want but expected. I had been in those rooms, in some of those moments, but never in the frame. Driving home, I kept both hands tight on the wheel, knuckles whitening as memories began rearranging themselves in my mind, moments I'd written off, forgiven, forgotten. But now, they filed back into place, in perfect order. My 29th birthday. I had stayed late at work to finish a proposal for a new client. No messages from family. I told myself everyone was busy. Then, scrolling social media during a late dinner alone, I saw it. A story Narina posted. Sister spa day, Nasher bonding. Except I wasn't in the photo. The hand holding the mimosa across the table. Not mine. At the time, I shrugged it off. Now, I saw it for what it was. Strategic storytelling, public performance, the illusion of intimacy with me edited out. That caption wasn't just a lie, it was a replacement. When you're always asked to understand others, no one ever stops to understand you. I had been the buffer, the excuse, the quiet sibling who didn't demand center stage, and they liked it that way. I was the shadow, so Narina could shine brighter. Later that evening, still stewing but calm, I opened my laptop to finish work when a notification popped up in my inbox. The sender, Franklin Mays, Attorneys at Law. Subject line, Draft, Estate Revision Review. Attached, a PDF. No greeting, no explanation, just a forwarded file. It didn't take long to see what it was. A draft of my parents' updated will. Narina was listed first, primary beneficiary of the family trust. She would inherit the vacation home in Michigan, the vintage car collection Tristan bragged about at every dinner, and a full allocation of stocks from Elodia's portfolio. Me? Education fund for future children. I stared at the phrase like it had teeth. I had no children. I'd made it clear I didn't plan to. And they knew that. The line below read, "To Serafina, who has always valued her independence." Even in paperwork, I was positioned as the one who didn't need anything, framed as self-sufficient to justify being left out. I pushed the laptop away, not because I was surprised, but because it confirmed what I had started to suspect. The Porsche wasn't a slip. The scarf wasn't an oversight. The photos weren't neglect. This wasn't a sequence of accidents. It was structure. They were building something, a legacy, one that didn't include me, except where I could fund it, elevate it, or stay out of the way. I got up, grabbed a glass of water, and sat by the window. Snow had started to fall again, soft at first, building in quiet layers, covering the streets in white forgetfulness. I opened the Notes app on my phone. Legacy doesn't mean inheritance, it means who gets remembered. The next morning I woke up early. I needed air, but I couldn't bring myself to walk in circles through the same neighborhood sidewalks. Instead, I drove to a quiet coffee shop downtown, one of those old brick places with dark wood tables and no music, the kind of place where no one bothers you if you don't take your coat off. As I waited for my latte, I scrolled through photos again. Not digital, not curated, the ones stored in my camera roll because I wanted to keep them. One from a solo trip to Portugal, one from the rooftop of my old apartment with a friend who'd since moved to Seattle. None of them included my family. Back home, I spent the afternoon cleaning, aggressively. The kind of cleaning you do when your mind needs order more than your home does. By late afternoon, a knock came, not a casual one, deliberate. A delivery guy in a Navy uniform handed me a large envelope. No return address, just my name written in a too-familiar scrawl. Inside, a printed invitation on thick cardstock. Dinner, Saturday night. A celebration of the family's rising star. Formal attire. Cocktails at 6. Dinner at 7. At the bottom, scrawled in someone's rushed handwriting, Serafina's attendance optional. I sat back on the couch, letter in hand. It was no longer just about being excluded. It was about being rewritten out of existence. I read the line again, attendance optional. That was the moment I decided optional was no longer good enough. The invitation still sat unopened on my kitchen counter, an intentional act of defiance on my part. I wasn't going to RSVP. I wasn't going to pretend that I hadn't read the final line, Serafina's attendance optional. I wasn't optional. I wasn't background noise. And if that's the story they wanted to write, then I was about to give them a new ending. I met Tristan at a cafe the next morning. He'd suggested coffee and a quick catch-up, but I knew better. He arrived in a full tailored suit and offered that thin smile he reserved for clients and strangers he wanted to impress. "Morning," he said, sliding into the booth without waiting for me to respond. I nodded, not bothering with pleasantries. "I brought something," he said, producing a manila envelope from his briefcase and pushing it across the table like a dealer laying down a card. "What is it?" I asked without reaching for it. "Just a small update on business matters," he replied, lifting his coffee cup like he hadn't just weaponized casual language. I opened it. Inside were documents, legal ones, with signatures and notary stamps. My eyes skimmed the lines until they stopped at a name that didn't belong there. Narina Moreland, co-owner of my Porsche. Dated 2 weeks ago. Backdated. My pulse pounded in my ears. I looked up. He was sipping his latte like he hadn't just rearranged the truth. You rewrote the title, I said slowly. I streamlined the process, he corrected. You forged my signature. He shrugged. It's better for all of us this way. Narina has more mobility. She's networking. She needs to make impressions. And what exactly do I need, Dad? He didn't answer. I leaned forward. Did Narina know? He didn't hesitate. Of course. We all agreed it was the smartest move. The weight of "we all" hung in the air like smoke. Elodia, Narina, possibly even his attorney. Every one of them had nodded along to this betrayal like it was just another box on a family to-do list. I thought back to last week, when Narina had smirked over dinner and joked, "So technically, it could be mine someday, right?" I'd smiled tightly, assuming it was just her usual grasping humor. Turns out, she wasn't joking. They didn't just take the car. They took my autonomy, rewrote my rights, reshaped my boundaries, and called it efficiency. Back home that evening, I opened my files, the ones labeled "just in case," that I rarely touched. A few months ago, Tristan had floated the idea of me stepping into the COO position at the family's boutique real estate firm. I'd been hesitant, said I needed time, but I'd followed up, sent over a comprehensive proposal, built out a 5-year strategic growth plan, included financial models and a vision statement. No one ever responded. Curious, I opened the company's website. There, smiling with forced authenticity, was Narina. Under the header, introducing our new Director of Culture Partnerships. My job title, minus the responsibility, minus the respect, but plenty of spotlight. I stared at the screen, heart sinking, not out of shock, but from confirmation. I was too capable to be included, and too inconvenient to be thanked. Later that night, I sat at my dining table, fingers poised over my laptop. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I got strategic. First, I called Amanda, a friend from law school who specialized in asset protection. Hypothetically, I said, if someone forged a signature to claim co-ownership of a vehicle, "You have proof?" she asked. "Yes, and a dated original." Her voice sharpened. "Email me everything, tonight." Next, I scanned the vehicle's original registration, backed it up to 3 separate encrypted drives. I updated the Porsche app security settings. I changed the garage code, deleted every authorized user except myself, and rerouted notifications to a private account. This wasn't about revenge. It was about control. You teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate. And I had tolerated too damn much. Around midnight, as the wind picked up and rattled the windows, I stood at the front door and looked out into the driveway. The Porsche sat under a thin layer of frost, gleaming under the streetlight. They thought it was just a car. But it wasn't. It was mine. I was halfway to bed when my phone buzzed. A Porsche security alert. Remote access attempted. Location, unknown. I froze, breath caught mid-step. Someone was trying to start the car remotely. Possibly Narina. Maybe Tristan. Either way, I wasn't surprised. I opened the app, thumb hovering over the Disable All Access command. I pressed it, and just like that, every external attempt to touch what belonged to me ended. No calls, no explanations. No permission requested. I put the phone down slowly and whispered to the empty room, "I'm not asking anymore." It started with a ping, then 3 more in rapid succession, notifications lighting up my phone like a pinball machine. I was folding laundry in the living room, trying to pretend I cared about keeping my apartment neat when the buzzes forced me to look. One from a coworker, one from a college friend I hadn't heard from in 6 months, one from an old client. Each message said the same thing, more or less. "Is this your car?" The link led to Instagram. I clicked before thinking twice. It was a live stream. From my father's company building, a party, lights glowing, laughter audible even through the screen. And there she was, Narina, posing in front of my Porsche. A giant pink bow tied around the hood like a child's birthday present. She twirled beside it, hands raised in fake surprise. The caption? When your family believes in your dreams, hashtag grateful, hashtag next big thing. I didn't feel the phone slip from my hand. It thudded against the couch cushion. My mouth went dry as my eyes stayed locked on the screen. I wasn't just excluded, I was erased. The car was mine, purchased outright, registered in my name, paid for with contracts I'd closed, hours I'd worked through holidays, meetings I'd taken while sick or traveling or buried in deadlines. And here it was, rebranded, repackaged, and handed to someone else as a prop for their lie. The comments were worse. Your dad's the sweetest. Narina, you inspire me every day. Finally getting what you deserve, girl. Even a distant cousin I hadn't spoken to in years chimed in. We always knew you'd be the star. My jaw clenched. They weren't pretending I didn't exist. They were rewriting me into someone else's story. My absence wasn't accidental. It was part of the plot. The worst part? It was working. The lie was being consumed and celebrated. I didn't cry. I sat back slowly, reached for the phone, and took a screenshot. Then another. I documented every frame of that video like it was a crime scene, because in a way, it was. The next morning, I stepped into the office a few minutes earlier than usual. I needed the normalcy, the structure. I needed to remind myself that in at least one part of my life, people respected the work I did. But even there, the echo of that live stream followed me. Hey, one client said as we passed in the hallway. I saw your sister's video. Amazing how much your family supports her. I smiled tightly. Yeah, it was something. Later, at the break room, one of the newer team members approached me with a grin. You've been holding out on us. Secret heiress vibes. I laughed, flat, rehearsed. Hardly. He laughed again and walked off, harmless enough, but it burned. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and typed my name into LinkedIn's search bar. The first suggestion wasn't me. It was Narina. Profile picture updated. Bio. Content strategist, brand consultant. Public speaker. Featured on Crane's Chicago Business via Family Brand. I stared at it for a long moment, then closed the tab. That evening after work, I drove. I wasn't sure where at first, just somewhere. Eventually, I found myself near the venue where the party had been held. The lights were still up. A few cars lined the entrance, probably staff cleaning up or late leavers lingering. I pulled into a side street, turned off my headlights, and watched. Through the tinted glass, I saw Narina laughing with a group of people on the steps. Elodia stood beside her, hand on her back, beaming like a mother of the bride. Tristan was in conversation with a city official I recognized from the mayor's office. Toasts were being made, champagne glasses clinked, and there, parked right at the entrance under a gold spotlight, was the Porsche. My Porsche. Still wrapped with that ridiculous pink bow. I could have stormed in, could have demanded the title be read aloud. Could have pointed out the forged document, the missing key, the silence they'd kept while building this fantasy around her. But I didn't, because I knew how it would go. They'd say I was overreacting, that it was just for show, that I didn't need the car anyway, that I should be proud of my sister's success. I'd be painted as bitter, difficult, problematic. I could walk in and burn the lie to the ground, I whispered to myself, hands gripping the wheel. But I've learned they love playing victim. So I did what they never expected. I documented. I opened my laptop, connected to the nearest hotspot, and started building a new folder. Family fraud. Exhibit A. Screenshots. Timestamps. GPS logs. The updated registration showing the backdated co-ownership, the live stream, the comments, her bio. All of it. I didn't need a fight. I needed evidence. Let them throw parties. Let them pose and toast and post. Let them write a script where I was the jealous sister watching from the sidelines, because I wasn't just watching, I was recording. They threw a party to celebrate what they stole. Good. Now I had exhibits. The wind had picked up by nightfall, rattling against the windows in that uneven rhythm that keeps you on edge. I sat at my desk, nursing lukewarm tea and pretending to care about the spreadsheet open in front of me. The truth was, I hadn't been able to focus on work for hours. Something felt off, like the air inside my home was just as unstable as the snowstorm brewing outside. Then my phone buzzed. One notification. Porsche app. Movement detected. Garage door opened. My heart skipped once, then slammed hard into my ribs. I hadn't opened it. No one else should have access. I clicked the app. The screen loaded, slowly, painfully, until the live camera feed kicked in. A tow truck, backing into my driveway, metal glinting under the streetlights. A man stepped out, clipboard in hand, already maneuvering toward the car. And beside him, there he was, Tristan, hands in his coat pockets, calm as a man picking up dry cleaning. He didn't even knock. He brought a tow truck. I stood up fast, nearly spilling the tea, and grabbed my phone off the desk. With 3 taps, I opened the immobilizer system I'd installed weeks ago. One button. Disable engine. The confirmation screen blinked for a second. Success. Back to the camera. The driver now crouched beside the Porsche, wires exposed, tools laid out. Then the red light on the dash started flashing. The man looked up, confused. Tristan gestured wildly. He pulled out his phone, dialed, waited. My phone buzzed again, this time with a call from him. I declined. A second later, he tried again. I declined that one too. I screen recorded the entire feed. From the tow truck's arrival to the sudden shutdown, screenshots, time-stamped video, everything cataloged. No one was going to gaslight me about this later. They didn't think I'd be watching. They thought they could sneak in, sneak out, and leave me to clean up the silence like always. If they'd asked, I might have considered it. But taking it like this, they'd chosen war. I turned off the camera feed and went to refill my tea. My hands weren't shaking anymore. 5 minutes later, another ping. This time, a text. From Elodia. My mother. She'll crack once she sees the party post. Don't give in. Just let her feel left out for a bit. No punctuation, no emojis, just that flat line of strategy dressed up as motherly insight. It had clearly been sent to the wrong person. Me. A moment passed. The typing bubble appeared, then disappeared. No follow-up, no apology, just silence. I reread the message 4 times. She'll crack once she sees the party post. I wasn't the difficult daughter. I was the one they hoped would disappear. Quietly. Permanently. I walked back to the living room, pulled out my laptop, and opened a new folder. Legal, urgent. I wasn't building a case. I was drawing a line. With timestamps. With signatures. With a new kind of silence. I called Marissa, my old law school friend. Hey, I said, not bothering with pleasantries. Quick question. What's the process for filing a restraining order? On asset interference? She didn't laugh. Someone trying to take something? They already did. I stopped them mid-theft. Marissa exhaled. Okay. Start documenting. Timeline, names, access points, any footage. Send it all to me, tonight. Already on it, I said. I hung up and began to piece it together. December 30th. Narina drives car without permission. January 1st. Family party, Porsche used as centerpiece. January 2nd. Documents show Narina as co-owner, backdated. January 3rd. Tow truck arrives. Tristan present, access denied. January 3rd. Elodia's message. I backed it all up to a cloud drive, external hard drive, and encrypted USB. I even printed the key screenshots in case someone tried to erase it later. Then I called the building manager. Hi, this is Serafina Moreland, Unit 4C. I need to remove all garage access for my address. Only my phone should be authorized moving forward, no one else. The pause on the line told me he was surprised. Of course, Ms. Moreland. We'll update that immediately. Thank you. I hung up. The apartment was quiet now. The storm outside had intensified, snow piling against the window frames, turning the street into a quiet white tunnel. Power flickered once, but came back quickly. I wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and sat on the couch, eyes still on the phone. I waited. At exactly 3:12 a.m., the phone buzzed again. Attempted access failed. Garage locked down. I didn't even flinch. They'd tried again. This time, they failed. I stared out the window at the street below. Nothing moved. No lights. No sound. And still, I smiled. "Try me again," I whispered. "Let's make it official." At 7 o'clock a.m., my phone lit up with Tristan's name. No greeting, no hesitation. "I'll be picking up the car in 30 minutes, he said. "Stay inside, the snow's bad." It wasn't a question. It wasn't a request. It was a command, delivered in that clipped tone I'd grown up with. The one that didn't tolerate pushback. The one that only existed in one-way conversations. "No," I said, clear and firm. "The car is locked. You are not taking it." There was a pause. Not long, just enough for me to hear him exhale sharply through his nose, like I'd just inconvenienced him with facts. Then he hung up. Just like that. No threat. No negotiation. I already knew then, he wasn't coming to talk. He was coming to take. An hour later, the street outside had turned into a white corridor of silence. Snow blanketed everything. Not soft anymore. Hard, wind-packed layers slapping against the windows. The kind of storm where schools close, businesses shut down, and people cancel plans out of pure self-preservation. But not my family. I heard the tires before I saw the headlights. Tristan's SUV pulled up too fast, slewing slightly on the icy road before halting in front of my driveway. I stood from the couch and reached for my coat. I'd been waiting, pacing near the front door for the last 20 minutes. Ready, focused. I stepped outside into the storm, boots crunching through the snow, arms folded tightly across my chest. The cold sliced through the wool, but I didn't flinch. I didn't back away. Tristan stepped out first, already halfway to my garage before I said a word. "You don't have the key," I called. He turned, unsmiling. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." "I'm not making anything harder. I'm just saying no. You don't even drive it half the time. It's not a community bicycle." Then the passenger door opened, and out stepped Narina. Wrapped in a white puffer coat, hat tilted like she was walking into a photo shoot, not a confrontation. "This is why we didn't tell you," she snapped, voice sharp. "You always ruin things. Always." "I ruin things?" I repeated, incredulous. She scoffed. "You could have been generous, but no. You hoard success like it's some prize." I took a slow step forward. "It is a prize. One I earned, without shortcuts, without Instagram followers, without a trust fund apology every time you screw up." Tristan moved closer. "That's enough." I turned to go back inside. The conversation wasn't worth the calories it burned. But as I reached for the doorknob, I felt a hand clamp around my wrist, tight, controlling. Before I could twist away, he shoved me. The snowbank caught me, but not gently. My head hit something hard, maybe ice, maybe the edge of the curb, and the world wobbled. They didn't say a word, no apology, no, "Are you okay?" Just silence. I lay there for a few seconds, blinking up at the white sky as flakes landed on my face, melting into the sting on my cheek. Then I pulled myself up, slow, deliberate, and limped back inside. My palms were scraped, my elbow throbbed, my pride bled, but I didn't cry. Instead, I walked straight to the kitchen table, sat down, opened my phone, and logged into the Porsche app. The location showed the car had already been driven out of range. Of course, they'd gotten in. But they hadn't gotten far. I tapped lockdown, and just like that, wherever they were, the car stopped. I watched the confirmation flash across the screen, glowing cold blue in my palm. 30 minutes later, Narina went live on Instagram. The notification popped up as I wrapped a bandage around my scraped elbow. Her smiling face filled the screen, seated inside the Porsche, parked in front of a designer storefront. She tilted the phone, adjusted her hair, and said, "Finally rolling like I deserve." In the background, you could hear the hum of the engine until it wasn't there. Mid-sentence, she froze, looked down, tapped something. The screen on the dashboard blinked red, and the live stream ended. Just like that. No explanation, no edit, just confusion and digital silence. The comments flooded in seconds later. Did the car die? Wait, Was that hers? LOL, the flex failed. I sat on my couch, watching the chat explode, and I smiled. Checkmate, I said to no one in particular. The bruises on my arms hadn't faded yet, but in that moment, they felt like symbols, not of weakness, but of boundaries drawn in blood. That evening, I stood in the bathroom, examining the damage. My reflection showed swelling across my cheekbone, a red streak at my temple, and a quiet fire in my eyes I hadn't seen in years. I picked up a notepad from the sink counter and started a list. Witnesses' video footage app logs, Elodia's text, property records, tow truck timestamps. This wasn't about a car anymore. It was about erasure, about rewriting me out of everything and expecting gratitude for the favor. I put the notepad down, pressed a cold compress against my head, and walked toward the living room. Just as I passed the front door, the bell rang, twice. I paused. Through the peephole, a police officer stood under the porch light, snow accumulating on the brim of his hat. "Miss Dahlstrom?" he called through the door. "We need to talk about an incident earlier today." I exhaled slowly, reached for the deadbolt, and unlocked it. Let them come. The knock on the door wasn't urgent, but it wasn't casual either. I knew that rhythm, firm, timed, expectant, the kind used by someone trained to wait only so long before entering. I opened it to find a Chicago PD officer standing beneath the storm-heavy sky, snowflakes clinging to the brim of his hat. He looked tired, professional, and like he'd already been to 3 places that morning where people yelled first and cooperated later. "Miss Dahlstrom?" he asked, confirming what he already knew. "We've received a report of a possible domestic disturbance involving you and your father." My heart didn't race. I didn't ask who filed it. I stepped back and held the door open. "Would you like to see footage from my home security camera?" I asked, gesturing toward the laptop still open on my dining table. He entered without hesitation, brushing snow from his jacket. "Yes, ma'am." "That would help." I pulled up the saved video, garage cam, front yard cam, dash cam synced from the Porsche. He watched in silence as Tristan shoved me into the snowbank, as I crawled back up the walkway. As the car drove off without a word, I let it play through twice. At the end, he scribbled something in his notepad. "This is clear. Do you want to press charges?" "Not yet." He looked up. "Why not?" "I'm not interested in vengeance. I'm interested in control." He nodded. "You should file a civil protection order." "I intend to." His tone shifted slightly, the way officers do when they know someone's more prepared than they expected. "You're handling this the right way, Miss Dahlstrom." "I don't cry for witnesses," I said. "I build cases." After he left, the house fell back into a thick, insulated quiet. The storm outside had turned from theatrical to threatening. Ice clung to the window panes. The whole world felt frozen in place. I made myself a second cup of coffee and sat down again, trying not to stare at my bruises reflected in the black screen of the laptop. My phone buzzed on the table, tagged post, then another, and another. Narina. I opened Instagram and saw the first video. Her face filled the screen, makeup perfect, coat zipped halfway to show off a rhinestone neckline. She was seated in the Porsche, parked outside a high-end boutique downtown. "Finally rolling like I deserve," she said into the camera, fluttering her lashes and flashing peace signs. But then, mid-sentence, something happened. The engine stuttered. Her smile faltered. She tapped the dashboard, whispered something the mic didn't catch. Then the screen behind her went dark. The car powered down. Livestream ended. Just like that. Within seconds, the comments flooded in. "Did she steal that car?" "Lomeo, why'd it stop?" "Girl, you just got exposed." The caption updated post-livestream. "Technical issue, we're good though." I took screenshots of the whole thing. Recorded my own screen. Time-stamped everything. Her video, my logs, the location data. No need for confrontation. Let them perform. I'd let the truth perform louder. I started a folder on my desktop. Evidence, Moreland v. Moreland. Inside, I added garage footage, shove incident, Instagram videos, the message from Elodia, photos of the bruises, service provider, logs for remote disabling, screenshots of title backdating. Then I called Marissa, my lawyer friend. This is no longer hypothetical, I said. I figured, she replied. You ready to make this official? Yes. I'll draft everything. What are you aiming for? Restraining order. Property reclassification. Cease and desist on public usage of my assets. Got it. Send me everything. 10 minutes later, she emailed back. This isn't just a defense. This is a credibility nuclear weapon. I reread the line, then opened a new document. At the top, I typed a quote I'd memorized years ago. Justice is what love looks like in public. Cornell West. I uploaded the package to a secure drive. The entire archive took 15 minutes to encrypt and transfer. I stared at the loading bar, feeling more grounded with every percentage point. At 97%, my phone rang. No name on the caller ID, but I knew the number, Tristan. I answered without a word. His voice came through, clipped and cold. You've made a mistake, Serafina. Silence stretched between us. You don't go against your own blood, he added. I let the words sit. Then I said, with a calm I hadn't felt in weeks, I'm not going against my blood. I'm just not letting it stain me anymore. He didn't reply. And for the first time, I didn't wait for him to. I hung up. The fluorescent lights of the police station conference room buzzed softly overhead. I sat across from the same officer who had visited my condo 2 days earlier, this time in a space that smelled like bad coffee and institutional carpet. He had a new notepad, a new tone, something more cautious, but also more respectful. His demeanor had shifted. No longer curious, now measured. We've reviewed the footage, he said, flipping through a file thick with printed screenshots. It corroborates everything in your statement. I handed him a USB drive, the same one I'd backed up to 3 times before walking in here. This is the complete package: timestamps, metadata, unedited camera feeds, and app logs. He nodded, tucked it into a folder. This could escalate, he said, not warning me, just stating it plainly. You sure you want to pursue this? I met his gaze. I'm not out for vengeance. I'm out for clarity. I left the station with my coat zipped to the chin and my mind sharper than it had been in days. The sky had cleared, finally, leaving the streets glazed in snow that glittered under late-day sun. That morning's chill had begun to lift, but the frost between me and my family had only thickened. When I got home, I set my keys down on the table just as my phone vibrated with a new email notification. Subject line, Family Matters, Stay Private. I clicked before I could talk myself out of it. It was from Tristan, CC'd to the entire family. And not just blood, family friends, colleagues, old neighbors, my mother's garden club, even my assistant from work. He had written it like a manifesto. The email began with concern. In light of recent emotional volatility, then slipped into narrative, he painted me as unstable, struggling with boundary issues, paranoia rooted in past insecurities, and finally, the punch. It is heartbreaking to witness Serafina attempting to sabotage her sister's opportunity for growth. There were no direct insults, just enough veiled suggestions to discredit me, sentence by sentence, to everyone I had ever considered a part of my life. The manipulation was surgical. My cheeks burned, not from humiliation, but from knowing exactly what he was doing, and who he was doing it for. This was classic Tristan. When he couldn't control your silence, he'd control your image. I sat frozen, hands balled into fists. For a split second, I almost reached for the evidence folder to delete it. Some deep, aching reflex to avoid more conflict, but I didn't. Instead, I printed the email, 3 copies, and slid one into the folder labeled False Narratives, Internal Sabotage. Gaslighting doesn't work when you've got timestamps. The next betrayal came like a mosquito bite. Small, quick, but irritatingly familiar. It was under one of Narina's latest reels. A comment, short-lived but screen-captured before deletion. Glad she finally got the recognition she deserved. Some people just like to hoard success. The handle, my ex, Elliot, the same man who used to call Narina chaotic energy and tease her about her lack of ambition. The same man who once told me he admired my focus, my discipline, until the day he decided it was too much. I remembered sitting across from him at dinner once, listening to him joke about how people like Narina float through life and still land better. That was the night I knew we'd never last. And here he was, aligning himself with the same chaos he once mocked. I didn't text him, didn't call. I opened my phone and blocked his number, his Instagram, his Twitter, every remnant of his digital voice. Then I blocked the version of myself that still wanted explanations from men like him. They only liked me when I was quiet, useful, smiling in the corner while they celebrated the mess. I wasn't doing that anymore. That evening, I opened a blank document and wrote a public statement. Simple, measured, no names. To those who've been watching the last few weeks unfold, I've chosen not to address it directly. Until now, boundaries are not bitterness, silence is not guilt, and truth is not an attack. I do not owe anyone comfort at the expense of my own sanity. I posted it. It didn't go viral. It didn't spark debate. But within the hour, my DMs filled with quiet support. Former coworkers, an old college friend, even a distant cousin who wrote, "We always knew you were the real one. We saw through them." I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean. There's something sacred about choosing dignity over spectacle, about letting truth settle without screaming it. I remembered a line from a book I once read: "When you own your truth, no one can use it against you." Around midnight, a new message arrived. From Narina. No emojis, no exclamations, just one line. "Can we talk?" I stared at it longer than I should have, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I wasn't sure she deserved the answer. Now that the storm had passed, what's left to rebuild, and what deserves to stay buried? The subject line was too formal to be accidental. Request for family conflict resolution, prior to legal escalation. I stared at the email from Tristan's attorney with a mixture of amusement and disgust. The request came wrapped in legal etiquette, but the message was clear. He was nervous. I leaned back in my chair, sipping my coffee slowly as the irony settled in. 2 days earlier, I had already filed. The petition was submitted, reviewed, and logged. Court filing number 22018-CH. I hadn't announced it. I hadn't threatened. I'd just done it. Sometimes silence isn't peace. It's preparation. I accepted the mediation meeting out of curiosity, not obligation. I wanted to see how they'd spin this. What story they'd try to feed the mediator. What performance they'd deliver once someone neutral entered the conversation. At 2 p.m. sharp, I logged into the virtual session. Tristan appeared first, his face as expressionless as a courtroom sketch. Elodia followed, looking composed but visibly uncomfortable. Narina logged in last, smiling like she was about to pitch a brand deal. Their lawyer, a man with salt and pepper hair and a too-polished demeanor, opened the floor. "Our clients would like to resolve this matter amicably, without further damage to familial ties. We believe in healing and mature reconciliation." I said nothing. He continued. "There's a mutual interest in preserving reputation and minimizing further fallout." I turned on my video. "Before we continue," I said, my voice even, "I'd like to enter something into the record." I held up the stamped filing page to the camera. Court filing number 22018-CH. Property fraud, digital trespass, attempted assault, restraining order already in process. Silence. Not even Elodia breathed. "I'm not here to settle," I said calmly. "I'm here to witness your reaction to accountability." Narina's face darkened. "You've always wanted to embarrass this family," Elodia chimed in, her voice cracking. "Serafina, please, this isn't the way." "You don't get to skip the consequences," I cut in. "Just because you're family." The mediator blinked, unsure how to proceed. I ended the call. Back in my condo, I made tea and watched the snowfall shift into rain. It was the kind of quiet weather that didn't feel peaceful, just wet, restless. But something inside me had stilled. At 4:17 p.m., my building concierge called through the intercom. "Miss Dahlstrom, a police officer is here for you." I grabbed my coat and met him in the lobby. He was young, polite, and clearly briefed. "Following up on a civil protection request," he said, handing me a thick envelope. Inside was the signed court notice. The restraining order was approved. Tristan and Narina were to stay at least 500 feet away from me, physically and digitally. I held the document like armor. No, like a crown. This wasn't just about the Porsche. It never had been. It was about who had the right to define my story. I returned upstairs, opened the folder on my laptop labeled Case Build, and added the PDF to the index. Then I backed it up twice, once to the cloud, once to an encrypted USB. I stood by the window for a while, watching the slush build in the streets below. The city had returned to motion. No more blizzards, no more storms. But inside me, something irreversible had shifted. I'd been gaslit, manipulated, replaced, erased, but not broken. I never raised my voice, never stormed into rooms, never showed up to family events swinging accusations. I wrote, I documented, I filed. I struck when it counted. I remembered something Marcus Aurelius once wrote. The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. I was nothing like them, and I would never be. As I added the restraining order to my digital folder, my phone buzzed. A text from Marissa, my lawyer. Narina's team is trying to reach out again. Something about a public apology deal. I didn't even hesitate before replying. Let them draft whatever helps them sleep. I'm not accepting PR as repentance. The voice message came in while I was brewing coffee. Elodia, of course. I could tell by the familiar clipped tone in the transcribed preview, half caring, half cloaked in guilt. We didn't mean for things to get this far, she said, soft but not small. Maybe someday you'll understand. I played it twice, not because I didn't hear it the first time, but because I wanted to confirm. She still hadn't changed. She wasn't apologizing. She was narrating a version of events where no one was truly responsible, where the damage was unfortunate but also inevitable, where I would eventually understand, and by doing so, absorb it. I deleted the message, not out of anger, but because I didn't need to keep confirming who they were. I already knew. That morning, I took my coffee to go and headed out into the clear, post-storm air. Lincoln Park had thawed slightly, slush on the sidewalks, icy patches that warned you to walk slow and pay attention. I walked alone, coat zipped, gloves on, breath visible. People passed me, strollers, joggers, dog walkers bundled up in puffers and knit hats, the kind of quiet day where nothing seems urgent. And somehow, that contrast sharpened everything I had just lived through. The lawsuit hadn't been made public yet, but enough people knew, enough whispers had circulated, and yet, out here, no one cared. That was the beauty of the world continuing. It reminded you how small certain wars really are. I stopped near a community board outside a cafe. A flyer caught my eye. Women in Power, Entrepreneurship Summit, March 10th. I took one, folded it, and slipped it into my coat pocket. Not for ambition, not to prove anything, because I could, because I was still building. I thought of the version of myself 5 years ago who would have walked by, thinking she had to choose between being brilliant or being liked, between being honest or being quiet, between boundaries or peace. I spent too long being someone who asked for less to keep the peace, and peace never came. By mid-afternoon, I found myself parked outside my parents' house. I hadn't called, hadn't announced I was coming. I wasn't here for confrontation, just retrieval. Elodia answered the door, wearing a robe and a half-finished expression of surprise. Serafina? I'm just here for my things. She stepped aside without protest. I walked straight to the attic. It was dusty, dim, and untouched. Boxes stacked by seasons and labels only she could decode. I knew exactly which one was mine, labeled college stuff, but inside held everything from childhood journals to old birthday cards to the letter my mother wrote me when I turned 18, and she still believed I'd follow her version of adulthood. I didn't speak. I didn't ask for anything else. On my way back down, Narina stood at the bottom of the stairs, arms crossed, hair too perfect for someone pretending this wasn't staged. You think this means you win? She asked. I adjusted the box in my arms and met her eyes. No, it means I finally know what not to fight for. She didn't move, didn't argue, just stood there, confused by how quiet strength doesn't need a microphone. I left. Back home, I placed the box on my kitchen table and opened it like it held treasure. Inside, a scrapbook I made in 7th grade. My first writing award, a faded photo of me and my childhood dog, Poppy, and, near the bottom, folded in half with jagged edges, a letter to myself, written in blue gel pen. I hope you didn't give up on yourself to make them happy. I read it 3 times, then found an old silver frame and placed it on my desk. I declined a media request that night. Some podcast wanted the story before it made bigger headlines. I replied, the story matters, but not more than my piece. That night, I didn't scroll. I didn't check if Narina had posted. I didn't reread messages. I closed my laptop, not as an act of avoidance, but completion. I went to bed early, slept deeply, until the next morning. A knock at the door, not a police officer this time, a courier, certified mail, from Tristan. Inside, 1 page, 1 sentence. We've amended the estate. You're no longer listed. No signature flourish, no explanation, just the legal equivalent of slamming a door. I stood there, letter in hand, for less than a minute. Then I walked to the fireplace, lit a match, watched it burn, and whispered to no one but myself, I've already inherited what matters, and it wasn't yours to give. The virtual hearing began with the usual robotic formality. This session is now in order, the Honorable Judge Ellison presiding. I adjusted my laptop camera. My face was calm, composed, my hands folded in my lap. I'd been preparing for this for weeks, but not in the way Tristan assumed. This wasn't strategy. This was simply the end of a line they thought they'd keep moving. The judge cleared his throat. We are here to confirm the execution of the estate revisions and the terms surrounding the protection order submitted under case number 222019 CH. I didn't look at the other boxes on the screen, but I knew who was there. Tristan's name in the corner, his video turned off. Elodia next to him, muted but present. Narina under her married name, added not for love, but image. The judge continued. Full return of property to Serafina Dahlstrom, awarded damages in the amount of... It blurred for a moment, not from emotion, but because I didn't care about the numbers anymore. The ruling ended with a formality. I unmuted. I have nothing more to add, Your Honor. The judge nodded. You've carried this with a great deal of restraint. I smiled, just enough to be polite. I let my evidence speak, I said. Now I let silence do the rest. That afternoon, the headline landed on a handful of news sites. I didn't ask for it. I didn't tip anyone off. But someone had leaked the filing, and the press did what it does best. Luxury family feud. Business leader disinherits daughter who exposed fraud. The story spread fast. At first, just a few comments, then dozens, then hundreds. Threads appeared on Reddit. Tweets went viral. Someone dug up Narina's live stream with the Porsche. A deleted story resurfaced on TikTok with captions like, Guess she didn't own it after all. They found the receipts, the doctored registrations, the staged posts, even a few public photos where Tristan and Narina stood in front of the car as if it were a shared trophy. They thought the internet would forget. It didn't. Brands pulled out. Narina lost 2 sponsorships within 48 hours. Tristan's board called an emergency meeting. Within days, he was quietly pressured to transition out. I didn't post. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Truth had its own gravity. I opened my laptop and typed a message to Marissa. Do not pursue the remaining settlement. Let them keep the money. I've kept my name. The reply came minutes later. Are you sure? I was. That evening, I drafted a letter and sent part of the damages I had received, before taxes, to a nonprofit that provided legal support for women dealing with family-based coercion. No public check, no announcement, just an email and a wire transfer. A day later, I got a note from the director. Your story will help more than you know. I didn't respond. I simply stared at the sentence and whispered back. That's enough. I could have burned it all down, but ashes don't grow. So instead, I built. A few nights later, I hosted dinner on my rooftop. Just 3 close friends, no photographers, no forced conversations, just real connection. The air was crisp but manageable. We lit small candles and sat under string lights with soup and wine. It was the most unremarkable, perfect gathering I'd had in years. Halfway through the meal, Laura raised her glass. To clean endings, she said. To quiet starts, added Denise. Kara smirked. So, Serafina, now that you've reclaimed your throne, can I borrow the car next weekend? I laughed for real. Only if you sign a contract in blood. They laughed too, and the weight on my chest lightened. Later, while the others chatted about weekend plans, I stepped aside, pulled my journal from my coat pocket, and walked toward the edge of the rooftop. The Chicago skyline was glowing. Not loud, just steady. I opened the journal to a blank page. I was erased by the people who raised me. And I rewrote myself without them. This car? It's just steel, but what it represents, that's mine forever. I closed the journal, took a long look at the city that had never once asked me to shrink, and smiled. Legacy isn't what you leave behind, it's what you refuse to let be stolen.